I was just starting out in martial arts about 30 years ago, I was so impressed by the guys that were doing the jump kicks and some of the weapons training, all that jazz. And I remember my martial arts teacher at the time telling me, you only need one technique. You only need one technique. You need a reverse punch, right? All this other stuff is great, but that's the one that you have to focus on. With other lessons later, such as weapons are an extension of self, but it really comes down to this core idea that if you learn the core set of techniques and tools within any process, any system, they ought to contain in themselves the principles required to be masterful in that domain. Meaning they speak to the essence of what it takes to learn not only that skill, but to learn all skills in that domain. That was what the reverse punch represented in a variety of ways, right? I didn't understand how that could be for weapons. They all seem so different, right? The movements are different, the strikes are different. Certainly it's got to be different swinging a staff than throwing a punch, right? And I felt this way for a long time. I think a lot of people do, because we still want to gravitate toward those, those more exciting types of practices. But over the years, it probably took me, I think 10 or 15 years at least before I started to understand what that meant in terms of the weapon being an extension of the self or weapon being an extension of the body. You can get that intellectually, but there comes a point when you start to feel the difference. And that point is pretty magical. And it's what tells you, oh, that's why we were doing the reverse punch. Oh, that's why we were doing the side kick, or any number of things, right? And this is the case across the board, I think, with all domains. But I think what I'm trying to point out is there's something magical that happens if you continuously go back to the source. Those foundational, the things that you learn on day one, essentially, that's the easiest way to put it. What are you learning on day one or within the first month? That's the stuff that ought to inform everything that comes after that, in any intelligent process anyway, and hopefully the people that designed yours were, if you have one. Within weightlessness, for example, the squat is obviously one of the foundational movements. It covers most of the mechanics that we would see in a squat, a lunge, a deadlift, even standing upright, and then at other levels, maybe leaping or ballistic leaping, etc., etc. It covers a wide range. The deadlift would also fall into that category. But most importantly, standing meditation, which teaches us everything. It's that one exercise that people literally dread. They don't want to put the time in. They show up to it reluctantly. But it contains all the special sauce, right? It's what teaches us how to integrate. It's what teaches us to base the breath, to sense and feel the ground. It's what teaches us to find symmetry in our structure. The value out of that, hopefully, if you guys have listened to some of the stuff that I've talked about, is obvious, which is that if we can find symmetry and balance, we no longer need the tension required to keep us above the ground, right? We can balance instead of resist. It's a difference between standing on the ground or on top of the ground. Most people stand on top of the ground, meaning they're not really finding that sense of balance. They're trying to just create tension to keep themselves upright, which is how people that start to hunch and lean forward over time, well, they always have sore backs, tight hamstrings, tight calves. Everything in the rear chain is tight in order to keep that person from toppling over, right, falling forward. These are critical aspects. But to get back to the original point, the benefit that we have by focusing on the source, right, and continuously improving the standing meditation, the reverse punch. Name your special sauce, your craft. There's going to be that technique and tool from day one that we can never neglect, because it contains the essence in that ability to vertically integrate all techniques, all principles through and through. And the advantage of that is scalability, right? So we're familiar with this term from the world of business or entrepreneurship. We want something that can go beyond us, right? Well, techniques that can go beyond themselves are ones that contain the principles that allow us to learn something else, right? You want to be a good jump kicker or spinning kicker? Well, you have to be able to throw the base kick before you can add a spin to it, before you can add a jump to it, before you can add a jump spin to it, and so on and so forth, right? Learning the essence of that is what allows you to scale. Standing meditation in my process is what allows you to do ballistic weight training and ballistic running and dynamic stretching, right? It may not make sense at first hearing, but that's the tool. You learn to do that, and then all of a sudden you become attuned to your body and are able to find those points of tension that create resistance and movement. In other words, you want to be fast, you got to learn to be still. Yeah, my 2 cents on that. Focus on the basics. Master the reverse punch. Stand, breathe, be weightless. See you guys.